Hello, and welcome to the DoneJS contributors meeting. Today is Friday, April 14th, 2017. My name is Chasen, and today we've got a huge panel. So Chris, do you want to start off? Say hello.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Chris. Yeah.
Christopher.
Joel, you there?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Joel in Chicago. Hey, everybody. How's it going?
Hi, this is Juan. Justin, Chicago.
Hey, it's Kevin.
Matthew.
Hi, I'm Snills. Happy to be here.
Hi, it's Ubad.
All right, thanks, guys. So we're going to start off with having the core team give their status, what they worked on this past week, and what they plan on working on next week, and if they have any blockers. So I'll go first. So this past week, it was a week ago that I published the stats for DoneJS for the month of March. We had some pretty good numbers, especially for NPM downloads. So check that out, links in the forum post. I did a lot of meetup scheduling and promotion. I know Kevin has some meetups, Justin has some meetups, and I have a few meetups in the LA area. So those are on the DoneJS calendar and on the website. I'm writing an article for SitePoint, so I started prototyping that, and then I started to look at the migration guide for DoneJS 1.0. Next week, hopefully, we will actually announce DoneJS 1.0 and get the release article out. So I'm going to be working on that, and then I'm hoping to follow that up with a here's how I migrated a example app to DoneJS 1 as a blog post too. And then I've got more conference and meetup organizing to do. That's my status. Who is next alphabetically? Justin, you want to go?
I'd love to, Chasen. So for this week, I worked on Can Reflect and made it, got Can Stash running about 33% faster initialization times. So I'm really happy with that. I also got DoneJS Chicago, a date for that. It's, I think, May 11th in Chicago. And then when we're all out in Denver 2 weeks from now, that Wednesday, I'm going to do a Steel.js workshop at Denver Script. For next week, I'm going to be working on DoneJS 1.0 and hopefully finishing the Can Reflect progress so that we can release a 3.6, CanJS 3.6 with Can Reflect. And I've started smoking.
Sounds good.
So next week you're going to be quitting smoking?
Next week I'll be quitting.
Is that your next wrinkle?
Don't smoke, kids who watch this that are CanJS and DoneJS programmers.
Probably not setting the best example. All right, Kevin, you want to go?
Yeah, so last week I was at a client, and this week started off the week by following up on some issues that we found there. The first one is fixing relative URLs in less when doing server-side rendering. So got that kind of half fixed, and then Nils is going to pick up the other half, so it actually works in production mode also. And then I spent a lot of time trying to fix a memory leak in Can Connect when you're using live attributes. So hopefully we'll get that fixed and get a patch out for that today. And then next week, I'm going to help with the DoneJS 1.0 release article and release and whatever else needs to get done for that. And then I have a talk at a meetup the following week, so I'm going to be preparing for that. The talk is on preparing for the future of JavaScript. So I need to prepare. So I'll do that next week too.
Sounds good. Matthew.
Hey everyone. So I've been working on a lot of DoneJS 1.0 site updates, issues that people have just discovered in testing it. Worked a little bit on Steel as well. There's a couple of Steel bugs related to that. Then, so coming up is we're gonna like I said, the release article, trying to get that finished, and then we'll flip the site so that the 1.0 site will be live, and then we'll have a place for the old site as well.
Awesome. Sounds great. Okay, I think that's it for the core team. Let's move on to topics in the forum post. Juan, you posted first. Would you like to give us a little introduction to the issue that you posted? We can start discussion.
Sure. So I was talking to Chris. Chris and I are bit buddies Christopher, since he's new. And we were talking about some of the issues he's been running into starting up on open source. And one of the things that stood out to me was our lint rules that we have, or lack thereof. Because it was something that I struggled with when I did my first open source contribution way long ago. And I imagine that him and I weren't the only ones. And based off of the issue, or the comments on the issue and comments we've seen in Slack, him and I aren't the only ones. So in looking at it, we were talking about how we could possibly fix it. We use JS Hint, I think, now on some projects, not all of them. And we're talking about using something more opinionated than JS Hint, so something like ESLint, and adopting some standard configuration for it across all our projects. The reason for this is so when new people start on open source projects for the first time, or we have contributors that want to contribute to our open source projects, they can transition from one project to the other. So from one CAN project, CAN module to the different CAN module, or even DoneJS or even SteelJS modules. They can do that seamlessly, or more seamless. I know that this isn't going to fix every transitional issue, but it's a big one. So I created that issue to really just discuss what people think. I think the consensus is people don't really care what the configuration really is, as long as it's consistent. And I think, like, whether you have an opinion on semicolons or single quotes or double quotes, it doesn't matter as long as we all decide on to use the same thing. The point is, I don't really want to get into bike shedding on any one of those different configurations. So the plan is to first decide on a configuration. Christopher can probably talk a little bit more. He's actually tried fixing some of the issues that he's run into. I think he said that jQuery, we use some of our original stuff uses the jQuery configuration. And indeed, when he applies that configuration, there's few issues. And a lot of the issues that do exist can be fixed using the autofix feature in ESLint. Somebody brought up a good point about some long-running branches that just have work in them that probably won't be merged for a good while. And Christopher and I did talk about that, and the solution there is we can help rebase these changes, these fixes, into your branch. I'm hoping that there's not going to be a lot of situations like that, maybe just a few handful ones. And that will kind of get everybody started so they won't be interrupted in their work. Other than that, I think we're just going to create the configuration, update all the projects, fix any issues we find, and update the build so it uses the configuration so Travis is working properly and returns errors whenever people are committing linting bugs. And I think that's it. Yeah.
Cool.
Discuss.
Yeah. Thanks for that intro. So I know in our contribution guides, we, if I remember correctly, we say that we basically follow the jQuery standard configuration, which it seems like that would just be an easy thing to pick as what we use for all of our projects. I don't even know if we mention in our contribution guide that we divert from that at all. I'm going to start off by saying, does anyone have any objections to us just going with whatever a jQuery standard config would be?
The other thing too is there was 2 use cases. There's one for open source projects. So can define, validate, whatever, like, kind of like those tools that we create. And then there's the generators in DoneJS, the thing that actually generates a configuration for somebody else's project. So if we're using DoneJS, and what is it? DoneJS new app, whatever the command is. When that generates a config, that's a whole separate issue, and we're not going to really tackle that just yet.
So that is how we created a lot of the can repos, is with the generator. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think what we'll do is fix those so that they are all well, okay, so the other thing too is
generator.
What's that, Matthew?
It's the plugin generator.
Yeah,
DoneJS plugin.
Yeah. I don't know if we want to have different ones for DoneJS stuff, a different configuration for Steel, a different configuration for Can. I kind of don't like that idea for consistency's sake. If we keep them all the same, we can update the generator plugin so that it creates the same thing for everything. And we can update the existing packages. And then for people that are using DoneJS to create an actual application that is going to be on a website running something, just like Airbnb's works where you can extend it, I think that should be the goal there, is we have this basic version that we all use, and then people can extend it with their own repository of configuration. Sorry, I forgot to mention that earlier.
Okay, so I think it would be best for us to, like, whatever we choose, we're going to update the plugin generator so that any new modules that we create for ourselves are in the standard that we pick. And then we would hopefully be able to go back through existing repositories, and if they don't have any linting, then add it, and then eventually converge to have everything consistent.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
An alternative would be to just make a generator that just adds this on top of, like, either an app or a plugin, a generated plugin or a generated application.
Yeah, so like a DoneJS add JSLint or DoneJS add ESLint.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because then it could just be added to all of our projects much easier without, it works. You don't have to, like, manually do it then for every current project. The only other thing I would add is, let's just start this after the can reflect stuff, because the can reflect stuff touches, it's not worth all of the merge hassle and the rebasing because can reflect touches so much. I would prefer we do it after that. Or you can start on the modules that can reflect isn't going to touch, but don't do it to those, because it's just not worth it, the rebasing.
It's like we're talking to what are those shadowy figures from the Avengers. Yes.
Wait, was I in shadow this whole time? Oh my gosh! I'm so sorry.
So DoneJS JS hint already exists. That is the example generator that we use in the guide for creating generators. But it sounds like you guys want to use ESLint so that we can create our own thing that can be extended.
Yeah.
One thing I mentioned in the issue where I was comparing the different options, one of which would be prettier, was that if we have a plugin system, then we could create, like, plugins for, like, the example I gave was BitDocs, maybe where we would want to do something kind of special where we want to format code comments in particular in a certain way. So maybe we would make use of a plugin for that kind of a thing.
I'm not, like, super familiar with how to extend the configuration. Christopher, you probably know more about that. and I do. That sounds like something we could do with just extending it, right?
It wouldn't quite be like a plugin setup. The way it generally works is you'd have an npm package that is the base ESLint configuration, and then each project would have a file that just says it extends that, but that would give the developers a place to add whatever custom rules they wanted to their project after it extends the base rules.
Cool. So yeah, that sounds like that'll work for Joel's example. Going back to what Justin said about doing all this work after can reflect, we can still create the configuration before we just can't apply it. That's what you're saying, right, Justin?
Say that
Sorry.
again, Juan.
Shadowy figure. We can start working on creating the configuration and how we're going to implement it.
Yeah,
but
that's
wait
fine.
until after
the generator can be produced.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Okay, so I feel like the things that we actually have to make a decision on are the standard, the tool that we're going to use, and then just our plan, which we've already kind of talked about. Does anyone have objections to using whatever the jQuery standard configuration is? Which I know. So just for reference, and I'll link to this in our in the CanJS contribution guide. We just say we use tabs, not spaces, JSint, CommonJS, and then jQuery's coding conventions. So I don't know if jQuery's coding conventions is spaces or tabs.
Spaces.
It's spaces. Okay. Okay. So our standard is jQuery except tabs instead of spaces. There's no other changes to it, right?
I mean, I have trouble with tabs myself for certain reasons. I actually made an issue about it, especially in Markdown. It can cause some
jQuery's
problems,
tabs.
so.
At least it definitely looks like it is in its source code.
Okay.
Yeah, so that doesn't apply to Markdown or JSON or YAML files. All those things we should have specially configured in our editor config setup.
Yeah, we're just talking about ES files specifically.
Okay, cool. So we can just wholesale say we go with whatever jQuery standard configuration is.
I have an objection,
Okay.
I guess, to that. I just want something that's really, really strict. It's not so much that we would follow any given convention. I just want one that's very narrowed down, and just beyond tabs and spaces, like actual syntactical spacing properties. At least from the team that I was on prior to this, we had a very strict ESLint where you couldn't, separate else statements from the if. Everything had to be nested properly. There's a lot of configuration that we can get nailed down, and I'd like to see that. Again, it's more about picking the right thing once and then just sticking with it. But if jQuery, if their configuration doesn't give us something that's very well nailed down, I think we should look at something else. If that makes sense, I could explain more what I mean.
Yeah, I know what you mean. jQuery's is pretty nailed down. I mean, I'm sure there's gaps in it, but at least from when I've submitted patches to jQuery, I've been put through enough pain to get it to comply with their standards that I know that there's a lot of specification there.
And that's another thing. We don't really want there to be a lot of pain. I know when I was doing stuff with ESLint for a previous project, I just enabled fix on save. So every time I save my file, it would update, with the correct formatting. I think that's an important goal. Whatever standard we choose, it should have that, determinism. That's what makes Prettier so nice, is that it's not really caring about what you actually write. It just parses the code as an AST and then spits it back out. And there's really no way you can argue with it or manipulate it in any way, because it's not even looking at what you actually wrote.
That's purely a code style tool though, right? Which not a like code. Like one thing I had to add to Steel because it's causing de-optimizations is banning changing arguments, because that causes de-ops in V8. I had to add that to Steel. I don't think a tool like Prettier would do anything to that.
And that was part
No,
of the
probably.
ESLint configuration that you have for Steel, or JSLint, or whatever you're using?
Yeah, I just added only that and nothing else. Just because I had to have that.
Yeah, gotcha.
So I think instead of talking about individual rules now, we should just create the ESLint config project that we're going to use, and then people can submit issue support requests to that before we start adopting it.
Agreed.
Yeah, that's great, because since we have to wait for the can reflect stuff, it'll give us a lot of time to discuss it too. But I also think I like the idea of going strict. We really have nothing right now because nothing is enforced really. So it'd be good to get just something easy to enforce and then take incremental steps to strictness, depending on what the community wants.
Yeah, I think just going with if there's an ESLint, it looks like there's like ESLint plugins for using jQuery's configuration or coding standards. So just starting with that, and then any additional work on making it more strict can happen in the future. Is that agreeable to the core team?
Yes, let's move on.
Yeah, let's move on. Okay.
Beat this to death.
Yeah. Okay. And then for the same reason, I think it makes sense to just go with ESLint for now, because we can get whatever additional functionality that like Prettier doesn't use. In the future, we can always create a DoneJS add Prettier if that turns out to be a better alternative, but just going with ESLint for now. Any objections from the core team? Nope. Cool.
Move on.
Yeah, we're moving on. So next steps. So Juan, are you going to be working on creating like a DoneJS add ESLint plugin?
Yeah, Christopher and I will work together on it.
Okay, sounds good. All right, anything else before we move on? Nope. Awesome. Who posted the next topic?
I think I did. It was the generator information, embedding that in the generated website.
Okay. Can you share your screen or talk about that real quick?
Sure. 1 second. Just start screen share. All right. So BitDoc should embed generator information in the generated website. Basically, what this means is like when you have a generated website with BitDocs, it's just the files typically that were output, and there's like no npm information for the plugins that were used to generate those files. So it can be hard if you're seeing some difference between like different versions of the site to know what was used to generate that site, to know like where a regression might have happened in one of the plugins that you're using or something like that. So I was thinking we could very simply just have a log file spit out into the generated files, either embedded in like the main document as like an HTML comment, as a log file, like a separate file. The only problem with that is then people could visit the file on your website, which I don't know if like Google would pick that up unless you had like some htaccess rules or something. But so any ideas on that? Nope.
I mean, all that information is in the package.json.
But not necessarily. You don't know necessarily, because like the GitHub Pages branch, not always gonna. I mean, even for the CanJS website, the way it does it, you know, with that script, it does it in a way where there's no package JSON information in the generated website. So you actually haven't. You can kind of try and go back through like history and time and compare dates of files and that kind of a thing, but that still doesn't really give you the right information because of the npm version ranges. You see what I'm saying? So you don't know exactly what plugin was used at time of generation. or even what version of BitDocs was used because of the version range syntax.
Okay, I mean, it's I don't see a problem with it if it can be how that data will flow through BitDocs would be interesting to me, because there's some parts like, you know, the finder or whatever has nothing to do with the generator, but it's not, I mean, that's fine. It doesn't, you know, I think it's nice to have. It's just, it's not
Mission critical.
well, it's not mission critical, but I guess like I would not, though, if you're implementing it, it's not, to me, wouldn't be worth doing a lot of backflips in the code base to make it happen. But as long as those could be avoided, then I think it's a fine feature. It's like a nice to have.
The way I was imagining implementing it was maybe just yet another plugin that just reads through the other plugins' package JSON files at the time of generation, like just like a simple file system kind of a lookup kind of a thing, and just sees what version is in the package JSON of the plugin that's being used, and then just spits out, you know, a log file. So I don't know. We can come back to it later.
Yeah, I think that's a good nice to have for us to eventually work on.
How do I stop screen sharing, actually?
There's a
I forget.
there's
Green
a-
button on the left.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Thanks.
Okay. All right, Matthew, do you want to talk about what's coming up for Steel?
Yes, I do. And I will share my screen. I used the Google's presentation feature because I thought it'd be easier to share the link so people could look at it. I've never used it before, so it's not very pretty, and I don't know how to use it. Can you see the presentation now? Full screen presentation mode?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. All right, so this is really more a presentation, not about, well, it is kind of a little bit about the roadmap, a little bit, but it's more, I would say it's more, what I want to talk about is more about kind of a philosophical shift in Steel. Maybe that's not even the right way to say. It's more of an acknowledging, acknowledging what Steel is, that it still serves a dual purpose, and how we can kind of make both purposes reach their maximum potential, if you will. Enough alluding to stuff. Let's get right down to it. So Steel's mission is to make it cheap and easy to do the right thing. That's Steel.js's mission. This is from the Steel 1.0 release article. So keep that in mind always when thinking about Steel and kind of where Steel should go. So, oh, this didn't turn out right. Oh well. So there's kind of the two advantages here. We want things to be cheap and easy for the users of Steel. That means we want there to be a very low setup cost to using Steel. You know, just add a script tag, Steel script tag, and you can start using modules, and that's awesome. We want to have kind of wide support for things. We want to make it possible to use package managers, to use every format that exists, and kind of interchange them all. We're going to make it very easy just to use different libraries. And then doing the right thing, on the other hand, we want to make sure that your app is well tested. So modlets, we want to make sure everything is well architected, everything's split out into individual modlets. That way everything's well tested. There's a demo page. It makes it very easy for you to create your application as a set of like isolated building blocks that kind of build up together. Very much what Steel is all about. And this is the right thing, and it's also helps the maintainability of your application. The right thing is also progressive loading, right? It's delivering as little code to the users as needed, just to show whatever it is that they're looking at. So this is kind of a dual purpose for Steel. Steel helps with maintainability and with performance. It's kind of the two things that Steel is about. Maintainability side is mostly happens kind of within Steel, within the actual module loader. This is what you use in development. This is the thing that enables you to like import CSS within your JavaScript. It lets you, use npm packages, those sorts of things. Most of the performance benefits happens within Steel Tools. Steel Tools has the progressive loading optimization algorithm built into it. That's what splits bundles and kind of combines bundles together. So there's a kind of a divide between development and production, and this is something that has kind of always been, it's always been something that's a little bit of a problem. It's something we've always kind of had to think about when building new features. I remember, I believe when Justin wrote the NPM plugin, I believe he did it differently at the beginning, and he found out that he had to like make a few changes for production to kind of change the way that it was built. So this is always something that's kind of lingering, is that, you know, every time you add a feature that's nice for maintainability and nice for development purposes, there's a little bit of a cost that you're putting into production mode. So kind of where I want to go is making these kind of more of a divided aspects of Steel, that Steel does both of these, but they're kind of different things to some degree. So I want to embrace that these are different. So there's always been development production differences in web development. I think it's kind of thought that there's not, but you know, we've always minified our JavaScript in production. We don't do that in development. With Steel, we load all of our modules in development individually, and we bundle them for production. We transpile them into a different format for production. There's INS configuration that we added that you can kind of configure things differently in production, and you can do the same thing with Steel conditional. So there's always been a little bit of a difference. So I think it's not such a scary thing, is what I'm getting at, is that, you know, the production side will be very optimized for that purpose, development side much more for development. And you see this in other languages as well. Rust is a language that Mozilla developed. They have if you just do a build, you get a debug build with kind of debug symbols and all that kind of thing, and then they have a different flag that you use to build the release version. And you know, it's the same true of like GCC has different levels of optimization, and you might use a different one for when you're doing development, etc. So yeah, so it's very common throughout programming to have different release and development builds. It's not such a scary thing. All right, so bringing that back to Steel is like, how can we have a production side and development side and make those both like the best possible thing that they can be for that particular purpose? Production, we have much more of a firm plan. This is the minimal production loader RFC I talked about last week. We're going to start working on that soon. And what we really want here is we want to have a production loader, which is kind of made up of it's like a Lego block building. We have like, if you need this feature, we're going to give you this, and then it kind of builds up. Another side of this is kind of a loaderless build, like a build that doesn't have a loader at all. This is kind of what Rollup does. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it kind of puts everything, all of your code, it takes away like all the define wrappers and all that kind of thing, and it just sticks it all in one single IIFE. So here's the building block plan. So you kind of have your JavaScript bundles at the bottom, and you know, if you don't need any of these features, then maybe this gets built out into that second thing, into that purely that pure mod, or that pure script that doesn't have any of the wrappers at all. But if you do need features, we can start like building blocks together. We can have like an asynchronous loader that's able to, you know, load modules using async script tags. And if you happen to need progressive loading, if you have different bundles, then there will be a block that adds that capability, and it adds the ability to do steel.import. And then maybe if you're using CSS, well, now you need some type of a runtime plugin system. You need something that can kind of hook into the loader and kind of do something different for this particular module. So that's kind of the idea there, is we want to make it so that if you have nothing, if you just have like a single bundle with no progressive loading, you're going to get kind of the idealized thing that you would have, the ability just to stick that into a single script tag and have it load itself. And as you need more capabilities, we'll add on different stuff to it, but it's still going to be, you know, stuff that you need for production. It's not going to have the NPM plugin and all that kind of thing like we have currently in Steel.production. Okay, yeah, so there's some challenges here. DoneJS does depend on runtime configuration. The minimal loader is not planned to have that currently. Like, so how do we work around that? You know, we have ems config, and we kind of use that a little bit. One possibility is we could move that configuration somewhere else, like into a JavaScript module. And another possibility is maybe there would be a way to do some type of runtime config, and maybe that's another block that you can add on. So there's some challenges there, but this is the thing that we're kind of looking at now as kind of the next big thing for Steel. So on the development side, oh, I didn't write anything on this. Yeah, on the development side, we're mostly thinking about performance. So like, how can we utilize multiple threads better? Web workers is a way to do this. How can we unify kind of the extension and plugin systems into one common API? This is something I've wanted for a very long time. How can we, take advantage of different caching opportunities that are available? There's window.caches now. There's service workers, IndexedDB. There's all different ways to do caching. We've never really taken advantage of this, but if we think about Steel, the development side as being all about development, we don't have to worry about production. Then we can start to do stuff like this. We can start to be like, okay, yeah, let's build an AST. Let's like parse our JavaScript and build an AST of it and cache the AST. This is something that we just wouldn't do before, because it'd be like, well, you don't want to do that in production. So now I have to like disable this extension in production, and it kind of leads to weird consequences. We want to try to integrate with the native loader somehow. This is still kind of in a fuzzy area to how to do this, but this is like coming along pretty fast. It's in Safari 10.1. I just tried before this meeting, and it actually works in Safari 10.1, which is insane. It's in Edge, kind of in the Windows Insider build, which is kind of like their beta version. There's a bug for Chrome. If you go to this, there's like activity every day just about, so they're like actively adding code for this. Firefox, there's a bug too. I don't see as much activity there, so I'm not sure how it's progressing on that side. So this is the performance things that we're thinking about for the Steel's development side. It's a lot more fuzzy, but this is something, some of the ideas that we have. As far as feature set, I think I'm not really sure what we're going to do as far as development features. I think there's a lot of things we can do, especially when we kind of change the infrastructure a little bit better to make it easier to write plugins than it currently is. But very much open to ideas for like what types of features people do want, because I see people asking for kind of these performance, making the performance of development a little bit better, but less feature requests. So we'll see what we get there. So that's all I have. How long did that take?
Sweet, not bad at all. Were there some specific RFCs that you wanted to bring up or discuss that might have been in their final comment period, or you wanted to move them into their final comment period?
Well, there's the final comment period for the minimal loader ends today. So if you have any opinion on that, rush out to do that. I do have an RFC for kind of the development mode enhancements. I'm not ready to talk about that quite yet and to bring that into final comment period, but
okay, cool. Anyone have any questions or comments about what Matthew presented?
Yeah. So I think the big issue is going to be the architect. I mean, I'm sure you already know this, but the big problem here is how to architect all of this so it's manageable, right? And how you can have like
the difference, like the fact that they're different. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, like I mean, we could do like, I'm talking about like the different types of loaders as you need more features. That is going to be a really tricky thing to figure out, because in some ways we could just approach it and say like, okay, there's going to be these 3 main scenarios, and we're almost going to custom write a loader for each one of those, right? But I don't know. Maybe that's how we start it. but I wonder if there's like, I wonder if, you know, if we had like unlimited resources, if we would just kind of rewrite System.js, you know, to like, if it's even possible to write it so that there's like, maybe the minimal loader is, well, the minimal loader is nothing. And then the first step in front of that then is like something that just can load a script tag. And then you can add, okay, well, given some path. And then it's like, oh, well, now it's an ID. And it goes through all of these normalized phases, like a little mini one. And then you start being able to transpile code and things like that. And we need to be able to kind of, it's almost like we need to be able to build our loader, which System.js was written in a way that it's kind of can do that, but there's this really big core to it. And I wonder if there's a
big core because it's dynamic. So once it's not dynamic, then it's not big anymore. It doesn't need to be very big.
For sure. That's a huge part of it. And I wonder what that, I guess while you're doing, I think that the plans are great. I guess I just wonder if you have opinions on how that's accomplished. Do we go down that road of like trying to build like a, you know, something like System.js that eventually builds up to the same thing, and then we're just like, oh, buy System.js and ES module loader? Like, well, how do we approach this different loader?
So I'm thinking about it what the point I'm trying to get across in the presentation is we can make steel two things. There is a production loader and there's a development loader. I think once you get into talking about like rebuilding System.js, you're kind of bringing them back together again. It's kind of the same thing, and that's, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how I feel about that.
I guess I would say, like, from a maintainability perspective, it's nice because what is good is that like, I like how what's it called? Like how our build works right now is it uses our development loader to figure out to do a build, and then when your application, it bundles that development loader so that it just makes it's kind of like the easiest path to making sure that like all the code is going to run the exact same way. And then once that goes away, now yes, there's static analysis which helps, but as like the loader in production starts wanting some features and maybe not others, if it's not the same code that's running in development, that could be a very common source of bugs.
Yeah, this is the problem. This is the difficulty.
Yeah, so that's the difficult. That's what I said. Like, so the two options that I see are like, well, maybe we just start with this like minimal loader, and it's just bifurcated, and it will be a source of bugs. But because production is so simple, anyways, that it doesn't really matter. So who cares? But as people start wanting to do weirder things, I guess maybe we just say like we just, you know, we just ignore the problem, or maybe there's a way to adapt like what or maybe I guess what I'm suggesting is maybe there's a way that the minimal production loader like can share code or like becomes kind of System.js, or maybe you're pulling out parts of System.js. I just think there's dragons ahead, and it's good if we can take steps in the beginning to avoid them.
Yeah,
you know, like make sure everything's named the same. Like it should still be like our production loader should still be steel or whatever, and it should be steel.import, because if that's what like, you know,
I think it would be definitely useful to do enough planning to know like what are the differences in production development, like what are, like, get rid of the dragons, just find the dragons and bring them into the light a little bit, so we know what the potential problems are going to be.
Yeah, like loading from a CDN might get weird. Like then you're going to need the production loader to be able to like inject script tags, which it probably would be able to anyways. It's weird.
So So it's like the biggest one right now is like runtime configuration. I don't really have a plan for that. So my plan was just to be the minimal production loader is like we only support these like 3 things. So we do a build anytime we encounter stuff that doesn't fit within this. We're just not gonna be like, hey, you can't use this. So for time being, steel.production will continue to exist.
And that's fine. I think, and that's what I'm saying. Maybe it's just one of those things where we're just gonna have to like pay the cost in the beginning, where it's gonna be like, okay, we're in the production loader, and then someone's gonna be like, I want the production loader, but I want this one feature.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then like we're gonna have to add it to the production loader, but it might have the exact same code as what happens in the development loader. And at just some point I could see it like something's gonna have to give, but maybe not. Maybe it's like one of those things. It's like, hey, 95% use case, we got people covered, and then too bad if you want that last 5%, you got to load 15K to get it.
I think that's a good start.
Yeah. Okay.
So just to clarify, this module tag, once this becomes prevalent, you'll be able to load, not have to minify things anymore?
Don't know what you mean.
You'll also have to minify things.
Yeah.
You won't be loading a single JavaScript file anymore? You'll be able to break production into multiple JavaScript files?
That already happens with Steel. Steel will break into multiple bundles.
No, all the script tag, the module script tag, what that allows for is using like the native browser's ability to load like ES5 and do its own like linking and how all of that dependency management stuff works that Steel has to implement. Like that would be native code, and presumably, I think Matthew's shown that it can run much faster than like what we could accomplish. So like in some ways, actually, I think that's what its biggest advantage would be for development mode, right, Matthew? That's my understanding. It would speed up our development mode times.
Yeah, it'd be. I don't know. It would be. Yeah, it probably already would be a development. Getting that to work in production might be tricky because there's no like support for bundles and that kind of thing. So I don't know how you would do bundles.
Yeah, right now there's not good hooks for it. So there's limited behaviors that you can inject into that that it doesn't have to already support. And that's a big problem, actually, which hopefully they address with another spec. Which I feel like they're going to have to. They're going to have to because people are going to want to use it like on real world apps, and they're just going to have to.
Yeah.
Or like NPM and like all of these other tools are going to have to evolve to like match that perfectly, and I just don't see that happening.
I think they'll do it slowly over time because what happened is they tried to make this really big thing that had every feature at the beginning, and that just didn't work, and they were like gave up on that and said, well, okay, we're only going to support basically the equivalent of regular script tags, but you can use import. And then so I think stuff like packages and that kind of thing will be one by one added, not like it's a big thing. But yeah, integrating that with Steel is an RFC I've actually written. I just haven't read it in a long time, so I'd be happy to talk about that in the future.
All right, yeah. I like that you are making starting to clarify the difference between Steel tools and Steel. I mean, when I was writing the Steel documentation, actually, it wasn't readily clear to me like why there was 2 packages or two repos and what the difference between them was. Maybe
Steel tools it's the command line program you use to build like for production files. We've always had this. It did used to be in Steel, and Steel and Steel tools were like one thing. It was just called Steel in the very old version of Steel. So yeah, it's always been around.
Did you wear that shirt on purpose today?
Well, yeah, because I like the shirt. Yeah. Didn't accidentally put it on though.
Okay, we have one more topic. Anything else on this one before we move on? Any other questions or comments? Nope. Cool. Kevin, you added testy code coverage with ES6 as a topic. Would you like to finish us off?
Yeah, so sharing my screen. It's really more of an announcement than an actual topic to discuss. But if you're using Testy and you want code coverage, it's now working with ES6. So you can see here in this example with Testy 0.4.0, all of this code coverage is working, even though we're using ES6 imports and const and all this kind of stuff. So this has been something that people have wanted for a long time, and we didn't really have a way of making it work until recently. And then a bunch of people have tried to get it to work, and then Chris got it finally working yesterday or the day before or something. So it's awesome.
Yay.
So,
Awesome.
Yeah, that is awesome.
Whosever code that is that's not valid, like that's a static star property on 14. So you might want to tell them that
well,
that's wrong.
This is place my order. So yeah, this has been fixed now. We just need to update the code.
Cool.
Sweet. Okay. Anyone have questions or comments before we go?
Star is valid, right? It's back. I mean, it's not. It works, right? It still works.
No, it was on the static. It was defined as a static property. That doesn't work. Star does work, but you should use pound on list. Star on every single property, not only the enumerated ones, but any expando ones as well.
It's on the prototype now?
Yeah, it's on. You define it on the prototype properties, star and pound.
So yeah, Matthew, I think you changed this to use pound this week, or I think Christopher opened an issue.
Yeah, I did change
it. Got fixed. Yeah. So we probably need to fix it in the actual placement order repo.
Cool. Anything before we go? Nope. Awesome. All right. Thanks, guys, for joining. Everyone who's watching on YouTube with the live stream or after the fact, thanks for watching, and see you guys next week.